Hi, everybody. Um, I'm just checking to see who's here. Hope everyone's doing well. Um, it is Friday. It's Mahamudra for the people. And um, I'm also, after this, going into retreat after this class today, which I'm excited about. So it's a little bit of a special day, at least it feels that way to me. Um, yeah, and it's ironic because somebody asked me if I would talk about a short little text, maybe take a slight break from the heart of the matter. And that person's not here, but I'm going to do this anyway because they asked, and um, this is being recorded, and so they'll be able to catch up with it. And it's from a new book that just came out. And let's see, let me see if I can see. Okay, yeah, I see myself. So it's called Songs of Realization and Pith Instructions, written by Khenpo Gangshar Wangpo. Um, and this actually just came out, I think, last week. I got it in the mail this week. And so Khenpo Gangshar was a pretty interesting person. He was a teacher, one of Trungpa Rinpoche's teachers, and also a teacher to a number of people. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, Trungpa Rinpoche, and when the Chinese had invaded Tibet, and it was very clear that the political instability there was going to lead to worse things for the Tibetan people. Khenpo Gangshar decided, I'm paraphrasing, but Trungpa mentions this in his autobiography, that basically Khenpo Gangshar was like, look, I'm going to teach Mahamudra to as many people as possible so that they can achieve awakening. And so for all the, the much like Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine, where all the people, all the moms, the dads, the kids, the elderly, no matter what your role is in a family structure, but when faced with this intense chaos, potential death, how to be able to, liberate one's mind, liberate experience, and to begin to really kind of quickly open up to awakening. And at the end of the day, this meant that he ended up being captured by the Chinese, imprisoned, and disappeared. And ostensibly, nobody really knows what happened to him, but it's likely that the Chinese killed him. Trungpa Rinpoche and all a lot of others, fled Tibet. But Khenpo Gangshar, and there are a number of other teachers who decide to stay back for the benefit of the people that couldn't leave. And it's an interesting, not only is it an interesting thing historically, I find, because sometimes these folks tend to get a little overlooked because they're lesser known to the wider world. It also, this kind of desire to stay in the hell or the suffering or the pain or the chaos is a really helpful reminder for us sometimes, I find, or at least a reminder for me, around when in really difficult circumstances, how can I not leave but stay? And so even in like one's own life, how to be able to stay and not leave when we're feeling discomfort or when we're feeling sadness, how to be able to stay and not leave when we're feeling jealousy or rage, and how to stay and not leave when we're feeling broken, and in a sense, I had the opportunity to get lunch with a friend who's a Zen teacher in New York City, and he's a very kind person, and he was like, how are you recovering from all of your time, at Rikers? Because I just, he's like, this is going to take you years for your body to adjust, and he's right. And I was also moved by something that he said, which was, you can't experience open, vast mind when you're in a chaotic place, right? And when your body is somatically kind of taking in all of these data points, right? All the chaos, all the hardship, noise, and I I didn't push back because we were having a nice lunch, but in my mind I was pushing back because I think that's the thing that kept me able to go on at Rikers Island, was to stay and not leave, right? To stay in intense somatic response to, how horrible and violent and intense and broken that system is. And so this is something, that I'm gonna ask everyone to kind of just consider for yourself. And there's really no right answer, because I think that you can find a home in a hellish place. Um, I think it becomes a problem. Everything becomes a problem when we make it into a universal, right? I will stay here forever. That's not realistic. I mean, especially given the fact that impermanence and change is constant. And so that kind of more eternalist thinking of like, I will stay in this place forever is fundamentally unrealistic, and probably not something we can do. But it doesn't mean that we can't stay. And, I guess we have some really wonderful examples of teachers who did. Garchen Rinpoche is one who stayed and was imprisoned and received Dharma training while in prison. And then there's a teacher I met, we call him Pur Rinpoche or Tibet Rinpoche, just because he came down from Tibet to Rumtek, and that's just what everybody called him. But he was a Drikung Kagyu kind of specialist in POA, and he too had been imprisoned by the Chinese, and had happened, luckily for him, had found that he was surrounded by tulkus, elder tulkus, who were able to teach him and give him Dharma instruction at night, when they weren't laboring in prison. So I'm gonna share this. This is just one page long, and it's a Guru Yoga. And I was thinking, we can maybe think about this from the perspective of not only what we're seeing in Ukraine, but what we experience in our daily lives. Suffering, hardship, anxiety, pain, but more than that, like more than kind of maybe you could even say like idealizing, because maybe this happens in Vajrayana, or I'm already in retreat in my mind, so my vocabulary is not so good, but I guess kind of like ogling suffering, the way that we kind of there's a word I'm looking for, it's on the tip of my tongue, but it's not coming to me. But how we turn it into kind of like an object of desire. Oh, I'm going to stay in suffering. I'm going to stay in samsara. I'm going to stay in my hardship. I'm going to stay in my torment. Yeah. And it's not to say don't do that, but don't objectify. That's the word. Don't objectify all of these negativities, because our mind, the thing that holds, that which is the container for everything, is fundamentally awake, and that is our true nature. And that is one piece that we can all connect to in our own experiences of suffering, in our own experiences of our own limitation, right? Frustration, loss, sadness, speediness, lack of sensitivity, all of the things that, from time to time we end up kind of, you know, stepping in, so to speak. So I'm going to read this, and the way for those who are a little new to Mahamudra for the people, my request is don't write anything down because this is being recorded, and just listen and experience and just see what arises, right? So kind of let the text be a teacher. So this is called Guru Yoga, Gathering of Blessings. Recognizing my mind as simplicity, I take refuge. All my mothers confused by ignorance, I will establish in a primordial state. Within the space of pure perception, innate awareness is free from emanating and gathering, and the unceasing energy of awareness arises as everything, pervading all of samsara and nirvana. This is the glory of existence and peace, awareness emptiness, in the expanse free of grasping. The naked, ordinary mind of this very moment, free from contrivance, is awareness, unconditioned luminosity, emptiness. Know this to be the mind of the glorious Guru. Remain within that. The naked, ordinary mind of this very moment, free from contrivance, is awareness, unconditioned luminosity, emptiness. Know this to be the mind of the glorious Guru. Remain within that. So, one of the reasons why I love this text is because, what he's pointing out is that our Guru is direct experience of our mind, right? It's not necessarily a person. And it's funny, like in the American kind of cultural lexicon, like you have to go find a guru. It has to be a person, and there's this whole like, what does a guru look like, right? What does that like evoke? And what Khenpo Gongsho is pointing out is that our mind itself is the guru. Our mind itself is stillness and movement. It's vast space, as well as the ability to be specific. It's beyond all experience, and yet without it, we can't have experience. It follows us like our shadow. It's also the air we breathe. It's that which gives us the ability to see and experience through all of our sense organs. It's pure, fundamentally. It's clear, fundamentally. It has endless capability for us to be able to experience. It's not given to us by anybody. It can't be taken away from us by anybody. It's present all the time. When we're born, it's there. When we die, it's there. constant. And in these times when there's so many good reasons to feel that everything is spinning out of control, our mind is there. The experience of mind is there. The presence of mind is there. When we feel like we're on fire, it's there. When we feel cold and without energy, it's there. When we feel broken, it's there. When we're healing, it's there. And the great thing about this is that really you only need this one page and you can throw the rest of the books you own away. You know, and saying that's a little tongue in cheek, but it's amazing, you know, when we begin to give ourselves permission to let go of everything, right? Just privately in, you know, maybe the space of our own homes or a place that feels safe, to just let go of everything that's we're experiencing in this moment, and to be able to just rest openly, freely. To the experience of mind, which is okay no matter what. Sometimes this is easy, sometimes it's not. There's one stanza from another song of his that I think just touches on this. Like, and he says, you know, in the wide sky of non-attachment, the great guru is the object of focus, right? Mind. My mind mixes inseparably with the guru, so kind of our relative experience merges with the experience of mind itself. The darkness of sorrow dissolves into the expanse. There's no focus of it is this. So I have discarded thoughts of it is not this. Ha ha. You know, and it's funny because you know, Mahamudra and Maha'ati, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, are often described as so simple that everybody overlooks it. You know, it's like you have the smartest people, your most well-educated people, all these scholars, you know, they'll like walk right by it or they'll read right past it, or they'll think, you know, or you know, verbalize through it. But that really basic experience of, you know, sometimes the word pristine is used, pristine mind, right? Untouched, untouchable, and yet constantly present and there for us to be able to experience, is there all the time. You know, we can come up with every wonderful thing to distract us, rage against X, Y, and Z, you know, and on a relative level, of course, these things are useful to rage against, right? To be able to help support those who need support, to love those who need love, to bring joy to those who need joy, respect to those who need respect. And yet, how can we really do that if we can't at least have some point of contact or connection with this vast, pristine, spacious, clear, abiding experience of mind? Yeah, it's kind of like that is um, to keep a finger in that, like a pinky or a toe, your small toe, just immersed in the pool of the vastness of mind, and then all of your other limbs and you know uh, body parts moving through the relative world, doing the work, but without some kind of grounding in this experience of mind, and without also the appreciation of how naturally it dawns, kind of like when clouds, it could be a cloudy day, all of a sudden the clouds start to part and the sun comes out. It's like everything comes into, a kind of experience of luminosity, a different kind of luminosity than the luminosity we use when we talk about, mind, but a luminosity nonetheless. Right? We didn't do anything. And I'm convinced that there is an aspect of our mind that is naturally predisposed to revealing itself. There's a part of us that is naturally predisposed to awakening, and that it's not all this kind of materialist, capitalist kind of, you have to do the work. If you don't do the work of meditation and all of these things, it's not going to come. It's very fear-based and constricted. But in these moments when we're able to relax and experience ease, this has a way of naturally coming into being, which is frustrating for people who have totally immersed themselves in this kind of capitalist capitalist materialist way of practicing. Sorry, the name of the book is Songs of Realization. I think Eric and I are typing at the same time. And I'm sorry, it's not and Pith Instructions. I'm trying to beat him. And it's by artist Kimpo Gongshar. And it's available through Nalanda translation. They're in Canada. So I actually wanted to kind of introduce this and let's see how this resonates with people, whether or not this is resonant at all, or it's like, oh gosh, I don't, or if I'm just like speaking for myself or to myself. In a way, that's all we're doing, right? Is just kind of performing for ourselves all the time. So yeah, how does this sound to people? And you can write in the chat box, or speak up, or raise your hand, whatever feels comfortable. Maybe everybody got enlightened. Should I read it one more time? Yeah, okay. Recognizing my mind as simplicity, I take refuge. All my mothers, confused by ignorance, I will establish in a primordial state. Within the space of pure perception, innate awareness is free from emanating and gathering. And the unceasing energy of awareness arises as everything, pervading all of samsara and nirvana. This is the glory of existence and peace, awareness emptiness, in the expanse free of grasping. The naked, ordinary mind of this very moment, free from contrivance, is awareness, unconditioned luminosity, emptiness. Know this to be the mind of the glorious Guru. Remain in that.
George bowing in.
Oh yeah, yes. Hi, George.
Namaste, everyone. Happy Losar. I like that this song talks of our mind as guru. I guess I have the normal Western hesitancy towards a living guru who's going to hold me accountable. But and then the higher guru would be a deity. But and he's out of the Tibetan tradition. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just it's contrary to, say, Pabanka and the real strict adherence to a guru. So my own weakness. George bowing out.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a huge difference in a lot of ways, right? So pedagogy and I think what's interesting though, anyway, there's a lot of difference between this and presentations of other traditions. Khenpo Gongcha was like Kagyu Nyingma. I think stayed a bit of time at Sechen Monastery in Tibet. But I think what's the most important thing in this is what Guru Yoga is, right? Like, it's commonly, I think that what the gut reaction about Guru Yoga is like, oh, I need to visualize some, person on the top of my head, usually, I don't know, and it tends to be male, it tends to be, somebody really centered in power in the tradition. And so, however one feels about those things aside, the larger point of Guru Yoga, though, is the cultivation of an openness within the practitioner. And so what is really important here is that we're cultivating this open heart towards our mind's fundamental awakening as the most important thing. Right. And so I guess, in a way you could almost say that this is kind of like the, and I assume this is Christian, forgive me if, for my ignorance, but like be a light unto yourself. Right. And so this is kind of like a way of supporting the practitioner to show that, fundamentally, we all share the same Buddha nature, right? We are all have this same fundamental awakening. And, for in the context maybe of the kind of Western presentation of Dharma in that milieu, like it's very easy to kind of fall back into this feeling of And I think it's more kind of like American culture that makes us feel disempowered, makes us feel, that we've got all this work to do. Oh, it's such an uphill climb, And, with Mahamudra and Mahaati, like that uphill piece is recognized to be partially our own construction. And so if we can allow ourselves to deconstruct that uphill, walk or battle or whatever, however one wants to kind of consider it, isn't there. We're kind of like playing out something that doesn't exist. We're playing out a story that, a conditioned phenomena. And for us as practitioners, like the idea of just letting go. And so again, I used to find this often in chaplaincy, and like ecumenical work I did, in New York City government, meeting with Christians who would say, let go and let God, and this is a little similar to that, right? It's like, let go into your Buddha nature, let go into your fundamental perfection and wakefulness. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing hands raised. That might be a thing on my end. But yeah, Ekta, is your hand raised?
Yes, it is my hand is up.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I genuinely really liked it because it kind of reminds me of the early Buddhist traditions where there was so much focus on the practice and the discipline of the practice, and understanding what comes up in the mind when it interacts with different things, everything that is arising within the body, within the framework of the body and the mind, and its experience of everythingness. And then when you talk about like Mahayana Vajrayana, where the guru is supposed to be the reflection of ourselves, so that to me is really beautiful, that my mind reflects what I'm supposed to learn, what I'm supposed to understand, what I'm supposed to open up to. And it really ties in beautifully. Like sometimes I feel that, oh, it is so different from early Buddhist teaching, but actually it's not. It's just beautifully packaged, and it's so gentle and loving, whereas sometimes because of the focus that I had in my training, which is so like practice, I find myself just being not so easeful, even though the practice is about ease. But when I listen to something like this, it just reminds me to just lay back and relax. So I think what the Mahayana Vajrayana give me is to lean back into the practice a little bit and just let it take over me, and just wait for it to flourish. And that has been actually much more beneficial than to beat myself up to sit X number of hours in meditation, because now what I do when I meditate changes completely. Instead of like I was doing it was not the teaching, I was flogging myself for practice being a certain way. But I just find that this idea that my mind is my teacher also relaxes me a little bit, because then I don't have to go hunting everywhere for this perfect teacher that is supposed to liberate me, because whatever I need to liberate myself is within me. So I just love how everything came together for me as you were reading it, and tying, because that really attracts me. What shifted in my life for me comes from the Four Noble Truths, and I try to understand everything in that context. So this was phenomenal for me to see, like I don't know how many, because this is a translation, right? Or is it a?
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was almost like 800 years of evolution just came alive in this one page, in this one translation. So I truly enjoyed it. I'm going to get this book, because this is my kind of thing, right? Like it's not pedantic. It doesn't make everything complex and very intellectual in a sense. This just cuts to the chase and just tells you that what you think you know is correct because that's what you're supposed to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, I agree 100%. And it gets frustrating sometimes when I'm gonna like reveal my like, I don't know what my biases, I guess, about this stuff. When Dharma is not presented in this way. One of my teachers, I had to meet with them recently about some kind of project we're working on together, and and I also had a dream the night before that they were in, and so I was like, oh, I had this dream, blah blah blah, and they're like, oh, that's great, and they explained the dream from their perspective, and like, but don't forget that you are your dream, you are your environment, you are your mind, you are me, you are everything. And these kinds of there's a lot of skill, I think, in these kinds of ways of teaching, because we don't, I mean, Hector, while you were speaking, I was kind of thinking about like the and you'd said, it wasn't the teaching, it was me that was having the hard time, right? And I think this is something that we all do all the time. And I think that we forget that it's almost as if, yes, like, yes, like, this has to do with Dharma and the Dharma being introduced, but then our work is trying to come out of the maze of expectation and the maze of ideas that we have about our practice. It's got to be like this, it's got to be like that, and slowly we're kind of working and working and working, but sometimes it goes fast and we can experience this clarity very, very, very quickly, very naturally, like the sun coming out from behind clouds. But all we're doing is working with the things that get in our way of direct perception of the nature of mind. And when we can see it as that basic, it kind of takes a little bit of the sting out of this, what can feel like a mountain of work I have to do. Because they're like, okay, I'm getting in my own way. My practice is me learning how to get out of my own way, to drop my projections, to drop, an addiction to concept, to drop the way that I categorize things. My practice has to be like this, or it has to look like that, or it has to, and to just trust into the wisdom of direct experience, which is, sometimes it's easy to do, and sometimes it's hard to do, but funny and weird, and then also it's sometimes, at least for me, like, sad thing about this is that we all have these glasses on that are patterns, and we're all like next to each other, like on the Zoom screen, and we're all suffering, and all we need to do is do that, and we're the ones who have to do that, right? Somebody else doesn't have to do it for us. And how we get to that point, though, is also has also, like, everything to do with us too. It's so fascinating. It's like a big joke in a way, like, Trungpa would talk about this being like a cosmic joke, and then of course it's totally sad and heartbreaking, because here we are, it's like a big Brady Bunch thing, all these different faces, and our patterning prevents us from seeing all of these different Buddhas, including ourselves. Like, we'll look at our own square and be like, oh, that's just me, but yeah, there's if it's okay, there's a question in the or a comment in the chat box. MJ said, I was also happy to hear you compare the idea of the guru to the direct experience of one's mind. I often feel very resistant to the idea of taking on a guru as another person in my practice because of past examples of abuse. Yeah, and generally distrust of the other person's intentions, which seems to be exactly the opposite of what is needed to work directly with the guru. I wouldn't have to I would have to completely trust, and I don't know if that's possible for me in this time, place, culture. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I mean, I find myself feeling that way too. I'm about to kind of engage on this project with one of my teachers, and there's always in the back of my mind, I'm like, am I gonna get screwed somehow? Like, there's somebody I trust enough to like, go see for instruction and all this stuff. But our conditioning is so and it's not for nothing, right? Like there are all these excellent cases of there's abuses, and shifting it to, can I trust myself? Can I open up to the experience of my senses? Can I open up to the experience of thought, activity, etc.? If Cordelia says, clear and early, direct and timely. I'm listening to that lie in bed, feeling physically ill, feverish, having COVID. Physical experience as a teacher. Hard to find the right words. Very grateful to the text. Yes, and I'm sorry you're not feeling well, Cordelia. This is what Padampa Sangye says. He's like an early South Indian Siddha who ended up going up to Tibet and kind of laying the framework for the Cho tradition. But there's a song a friend of mine translated for modern Tantric Buddhism, and in it he names all these different things being a treasury of bliss, and one of them is illness and death. And he doesn't mean like to be intense or macabre, but it's kind of like bringing us back to the normalcy of the way we suffer. These are teachers, right? And these are and it's not in a like overly Protestant way too. Oh, you have to suffer, like this is a teacher. It's more like everything is a teacher. Being hungry is a teacher. Being tired is a teacher. Getting irritable when one is hungry or tired is a teacher. Love is a teacher. Sadness is a teacher. And when we can kind of pull this all out to just be, and actually, not to plug modern Tantric Buddhism again, but there's this little segment in there where one of my teachers, Bokor Rinpoche, he was teaching Mahamudra, and he was pointing out that appearance is a teacher as well, right? So that which is lovely and beautiful is a teacher, and then that which is repulsive is a teacher, and everything in between. And if we can begin to kind of transform our relationship to the idea of the guru to include eating blueberries, and having that experience of blueberry taste. And if you don't like blueberries, then that's a different kind of teaching experience than grapes, and then nectarines and raspberries, and then all of these things are out of season. So participating in like weird food supply chain is a teacher. Everything, our breath, our dreams. So yeah, Aaliyah writes, yes, MG, me too. I really heard that, the simplicity of the teaching, the song, such that all the words and external validation we seek isn't really necessary. I feel like a relief, and then sudden discombobulation too. The latter is probably subconscious or even consciousness. Yeah, conscious discomfort of my conditioning cutting loose. Yes. Yeah, right. I mean, it's like that's super powerful because it's true. This idea, I mean, it's not even an idea, right? Because we're going to say that this is true. All of us have, fundamental, primarily pure Buddha nature that is our nature. And our conditioning has presented a totally different narrative, right? That sometimes we'll fall right into just, out of habit. Sometimes we don't fall into it, and that feels extraordinary. But our practice is coming back, to being able to rest into that fullness, that richness, that constant spark of potential. I still remember so vividly the day that Bokram Rinpoche gave that instruction on appearance being the Lama or the Guru. And I have somewhere these notes where it was, like in the margins of my notes, it was like, and I think it was he who said it. He was, watching leaves fall off of a tree in the autumn is a teacher. Watching birds fly through the sky is a teacher. Watching, a stream, a mountain stream is a teacher. Watching cars drive by is a teacher. And when we kind of develop this sense of open intimacy with everything that's arising, then all of a sudden our experience tends to change, right? As opposed to some very kind of power base, like, oh, I need to lower myself, and then somehow the Dharma's going to come to me, it's fascinating, isn't it? I'm wondering what other thoughts or reflections or feelings are coming up for people.
I have a question, and also am like very interested in the variety of responses to this question that are potentially present in this gathering, of sort of setting up the view described in this text and like applying it to a particular experience that is like laced with capitalism for me, and is laced with like production and exhaustion and worth, is like how to relate to this kind of pith instruction with the experience of time, both which is what I predominantly suffer from, which is the sense that time is a taker, that like time is like dripping past, and every moment that is like not accomplished in some conditioned way is something wasted that I'm never going to get back, and that is, it's like opportunities are constantly passing by. And capitalism certainly benefits from me feeling that way. So it does have a political ramification for me in terms of like allowing this view to change my relationship with time, and not in like with the idea of time, but to change my experience of time itself. Not to make time something that is, as Cornel West would say, like time is also like a giver and a gift, not just a taker and a taking. And yeah, would just love to hear about people's experiences with this practice and like the experience of time, and like how both it like time can be painful and time can be so joyful, and just riding those poles in relation to this practice. Happy to hear any array or arrangement of answers or inquiry into that question, or ignore it. It's great either way.
I have a response that I just thought of. I don't know if this speaks directly to what you're saying, but I've heard sort of teachers say, like, okay, we got to do this, we got to practice now, or we're wasting our time, and got to get to, enlightenment. And then I've heard the other side of it, which is like, how many kadam, or what do they call it, kalpas, have we experienced in existence? My teacher from Pittsburgh once said, you know, we have all the time in the world. We're going to get to do this again. We keep being reincarnated, reborn, etc. So don't get so anxious about it. So I've heard both those sides, and it's interesting to try to hold them in one time. But when I feel anxious about that, I'm reminded of his teaching when he said that. Thank you for the question.
Is it okay if I unmute instead of typing? I have a frozen shoulder and typing is sometimes hard. So I would say that question resonates with me so deeply. I brought my type A personality into my spiritual life and it colored everything. Everything had to be perfect. Liberation had to be now. The number of hours I sat, the minutes I sat, how I sat, everything was there. But the one thing that I learned was even while I noticed myself doing it, I understood that I'm not supposed to judge it, because that just keeps perpetuating the cycle of judgment and repeats the cycle of creating suffering in my mind. So I just stopped reacting to it. The one good thing that came out of it was that I kept practicing. And then one day that experience just changed. And one day I just had a breath that just came out. And then, like now I'm a person, this year, self-employed person, I decided my work week would be 4 days. It was a big thing for me to get here because money is on top of my mind. I want to earn all the money so that I can give all the money, and it's all of these things. But it was just something that happened to me as a result of practice. And it's just now, even though I want to stress, it's hard for me to stress. But I would just what happens is that I just stop judging it. I just stop. It is again a figment of my mind. It is coming up in my mind. This is an experience of hurrying. It's an experience of this, like the joyful experience, right? But I'm okay with the joyful experience of time and averse to the capitalistic experience of time. But I can't be attached or averse to either of them because in the end they are transient. And it really brought relief with it. It took 4 years. I hope it does not take anyone that much long, but this year it changed finally when, I don't need to be the best. I don't need to be the best because even when it's an illusion. It's an illusion. Whatever I'm working towards is an illusion. And this year I understood that even liberation is an illusion. It has to be in the here and now, nirvana, samsara, all at once, tethering that tightrope with ease of insanity and liberation moment to moment. But it's just something, the not reaction, not giving a reaction, that was something. Thankfully, my perfectionism helped me to obsessively don't react, so that's what helped.
I recently met with a different teacher who was pointing out to me, and forgive me, this can take a little bit of a pot shot at Zen practice, but they were saying, oh, all these Zen people are like, be here now, be present. And he was like, what it almost feels like they forget is that the mind is beyond time, right? And so when we're preferencing present, right, and then like we're still dropping an anchor that is keeping us a little stuck, and so to kind of get comfortable with this idea of like stretching out the concept, the concept of mind to exist, so what they'll say in Vajrayana tradition is through the 3 times, past, present, and future. So our this Buddha nature, this fundamental awakening that is at the core of our being, is still alive in the past, still interacting with the past. It is in the future, so there is this, and this is, sometimes how these kinds of experiences of people being able to kind of predict future events, right, is tends to be explained, is that the mind it's everything, right? And that's not meant to say we reduce everything to that, right? But it's to say that the expansiveness of mind is courses throughout the three times, which means everything in the past is still open to us, authentically. Everything in the future that hasn't happened yet is open to us authentically. The present moment is obviously equally, open to us. What's fascinating is this idea of time is equated with loss, right? Oh, you lost all that stuff. That just happened. Oh, that's gone. That stuff that hasn't happened yet, you haven't gotten yet. And it's so controlling, right? It's just just this moment now only, everything before, forget it. You had your chance, can't go back, can't do it over again. You can, and so this is when we start, at least when I've used the term conditioning or patterning, even that, what we think of time is very, 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 very conditioned. And yeah, our capitalism does not help that. Yeah. I'm actually curious, Tejmala, do you want to say anything more about what felt resonant about the question?
I'm really just processing all of this. This is a lot to take in. I hope that's okay.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to see. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If I could chime in, I appreciate what Ekto is sharing. I get caught up too in what MJ was saying about needing to wanting to reach enlightenment, or not wanting to come back again into this samsaric world, and that mixed with my conditioning around, well, even coming from a Christian background of I just the shame and I'm not a good person, being if I don't, not that I don't practice, it's I feel I don't even practice enough to feel enlightenment is near, which is contradictory to what we're saying here. But yeah, this fear of not reaching enlightenment in this life and having to come back and do it again and again. And it's I don't want to see where the world is in my next lifetime. So I just don't know what to do with that. That's just something that I think about sometimes.
Yeah. And for with kind of more kind of classical Mahayana view, and also Vajrayana, then there's all these world systems, right? So even this idea of this place, it can be kind of hard to let go of, because we're so conditioned also to this, this place, finite, nothing. What happens if we open our mind up to the fact that nothing is finite, and that there is a multiplicity of world systems, multiplicity of possible forms to arise in, and even to be I don't know if this sounds crazy, but I spend my time sometimes wondering, we're so preoccupied with humanoid form being, right? What if we come back as some other thing that's not even, it's beyond conception, non animal, some other structure, some other thing. And it's interesting how like physics can be that way, but then with our own mind, we're like, oh no, 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 I'm going to come back, just here to Earth, to this one place, and then the question too of like, Claude, when you were speaking, I was thinking about coming back until you finally learned the lesson. Like, how weirdly punitive, right? And is that what awakening is, right? Awakening isn't like the process or byproduct of a punitive process. And then when our heart is open, like with this kind of guru yoga, is that even a possibility? Some kind of like, until we're perfect. Well, we are perfect, and now let's move on to the next thing. Let's start being perfect together, and really, actualizing. But it's hard. Our conditioning is so painful sometimes. Can I read this one more time and we can see if this lands in a slightly different place? Allow yourself to just sit back, listen. Recognizing my mind as simplicity, I take refuge. All my mothers, confused by ignorance, I will establish in the primordial state. Within the space of pure perception, innate awareness is free from emanating and gathering, and the unceasing energy of awareness arises as everything. Pervading all of samsara and nirvana, this is the glory of existence and peace. Awareness, emptiness, in the expanse free of grasping. The naked, ordinary mind of this very moment, free from contrivance, is awareness, unconditioned luminosity, emptiness. Know this to be the mind of the glorious Guru. Remain within that. The naked, ordinary mind of this very moment, free from contrivance, is awareness, unconditioned luminosity, emptiness. Know this to be the mind of the glorious Guru. Remain within that. Isn't the idea of a mind without contrivance, or experience without contrivance, doesn't that feel so good? Yeah, George.
Yes, that's just what I was thinking, is that the use of the term naked ordinary mind is clear or resonates with me because there are so many afflictions and obscurations and kleshas. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And this idea of it feeling like a warm blanket fresh out of the dryer. Ah. Ah. Yeah. Um, yeah, this. I mean, it's weird, right? Because I was gonna say, oh, it's a luxury. It's not a luxury. That's a terrible thing to say, right? But it feels like a luxury because, like, it's like mind is like just like a little square thing. But a mind without contrivance, like, it's kind of like how in cartoons when people rub their eyes makes that the squeaky sound, like, being able to just have this like clarity of experience and just letting our mind turn off, the conceptual mind, the discursive mind, so we can just experience. And this is actually something to kind of think about in your practice or reflect on in between sessions. Like, when sitting, what is the difference between discursive mind and awareness? And just kind of like, occasionally just drop into that curiosity. So when we're sitting and you find your mind, it could be playing things out, whatever the experiences of the day or reactions, stuff like that. And then what's the difference between that and awareness? And there's a little kind of nugget in that. It's worth exploring. Are they the same? Are they different? Do they overlap? If so, how? To naked without specific imprints. Mahamudra, the name translates as the Great Seal, and sometimes you'll find these descriptions of it as it is like a seal imprinted on the experience, like a stamp, on everything, right? And there's only one way for that to happen, and that's for us to be able to recognize mind as everything, experience as everything, and to be able to begin to open up to the singularity of a much more non-dual relationship to these things. That's the Great Seal. What's alive right now? Oh yeah, Travis.
Yeah, when you were just talking about not having to contrive anything, the first thing I was reflecting on, like the creative process, like making art, writing poetry, or making music or something, and the difference between like having an idea of what I'm trying to do or what would be a like successful outcome or something I'm trying to, and then like almost like the pen breaking in half or something, just being like and that just like really like relaxed, loose, kind of like like self-happening kind of experience in the creative process, which is the uncontrived kind of experience, and then how that same kind of distinction can happen in my like formal practice. Like Ekta, when you were talking and saying like, I had my minutes counted down, like sometimes I get into that. And I think just even like over the past week, I've noticed that my practice has been a little like, all right, set the time for 24 minutes. And then I know I've done my part, and then like yesterday was Losa and I didn't know what practice to do. I was like, what's the appropriate practice to do to celebrate? And so I went out on my porch and watched the sunrise and I did whatever I felt like. And so like over the course of, I don't know, an hour, I just kind of like watched the clouds. I like sung some mantras. I did like an aspiration prayer. I just eventually just sat a little bit and just was like, this is the Dharma, this is like my, practice is this kind of feeling of, it felt uncontrived. I ended up doing all the stuff that I think I should do sometimes, but the feeling of it was, and that like kind of Dharma as medicine thing, came. So that kind of uncontrived naturalness sort of, and then, so I thought of it in terms of art making and then like formal practice, but then how that just extends to like getting off the cushion and just like everywhere, that sort of, that just like way, like, the world is a like pile of sheets out of a dryer or something. Or, I love that image. So that's it's coming up.
Yeah. So our patterning can be so insidious, even in our Dharma practice, right? Oh, it's like this, it's like this, it's like that. Don't violate, the instruction, like, don't go against it. How do you know? Like step in the poop and find out, see what that's like, I think that my root teacher she was a huge rebel and like broke every rule there was before becoming an ani, and then when she was ordained, she broke all the rules then too. And one of the things that she told me is like, you need to figure out for yourself like why this is the way it is. Like, don't just follow the rules because they're there, because then what are you doing? I mean, all you're doing, and like, even just taking that one line, like, so the naked ordinary mind at this moment, free from contrivance, is awareness, unconditioned luminosity, emptiness. And then if I'm like, oh yes, see, like that's the thing, this is the right thing, everything else is wrong, like it's already fallen apart, and so how to hold, I think this is why she told me, like, if you have to read and forget at the same time. Like, don't absorb knowledge, because that just, you're going to sit in meditation and then all that knowledge will pop up. Oh, I'm having an experience just like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. And that's not authentic, right? So to that, to your point, Travis, like within the creative process, yeah, sometimes you just need to put everything down and just do. And with our practice, I think that is much more helpful, to see, and I've said this 1,000 bazillion times, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but it is, I think Dharma practice is a form of art, and we have to get comfortable with getting out of our way, and then also getting out of the way of a tradition of instructions, so that we can really know for ourselves why this is this way, why this is that way, why this is, it's not like we're not doing this with morality, so it's not like don't kill someone. Oh well, why? Like, go out and kill it. It's not that. But with respect to mind, right? Why? how? We have to be able to kind of take it apart to be able to see why this works. And if we're just like following the rules, there will be some benefit, but there won't be like the fundamental benefit, that kind of ending of samsara kind of benefit. Um, yeah, and MJ, your point too, there's a fine balance between self-discipline and neurotic obsession with what were really meant to be guidelines. Yeah, absolutely. I was actually telling somebody at some point, like one of the worst, this is all tongue in cheek, but like one of the worst things ever done was the creation of Lam Rim literature. This is kind of an extreme statement, but like, so there's this, literature in Tibetan tradition called Lam Rim, like the guides and stages, right? And so it's like, this happens and then that happens and then that happens. And of course, the compassionate piece of this kind of instruction is it's nice and gradual and it presents the path, right? And that's where the benefit is. But of course, the unintended problem is that you see that and then you think you have to follow that exact thing. And if you're not, you're somehow like a screw up, and so, recognizing that instructions are loose guidelines, and sadhanas, we could even look at them that way too, as loose guidelines. They don't need to be, things don't need to be followed to the letter of the law, as it were. But out of fear, definitely hope and fear, our relationship to hope and fear tends to cause us to really like zero in on, this is all it says, and anything outside of that I don't know, I'm not going to think about, I'm not going to deal with, like I don't have the wisdom to experiment with. I mean, that's kind of absurd, right? Like we don't do that with anything else, right? If you're cooking and your recipe says have all these things and you're like, oh shoot, like I've got tarragon but I don't have oregano and I don't have time to go to the store, I got to wing this, right? And it's not like, oh well, then you can't cook that. It's like ridiculous. And it tastes good or it will taste bad. Like, what's the deal? Well, big problem. And then you just let it go, right? And with our practice, the same thing. Like, experiment. Yeah, we made a mistake. Whatever, that's fine. But Vajrayana in particular, we get so into the nitty gritty of like never make a mistake, and it's just very unrealistic. Should I read it one more time? Yeah. Okay. So allow yourself to just connect with whatever you connect to. And the beautiful thing of just like repeatedly going through a text like this is just something else will spark at a different time. Amazing how like less than one page, I mean, it's just literally like less than one page has so much in it. So recognizing my mind as simplicity, I take refuge. All my mothers, confused by ignorance, I will establish in the primordial state. Within the space of pure perception, innate awareness is free from emanating and gathering, and the unceasing energy of awareness arises as everything, pervading all of samsara and nirvana. This is the glory of existence and peace, awareness emptiness, and the expanse free of grasping. The naked, ordinary mind of this very moment, free from contrivance, is awareness, unconditioned luminosity, emptiness. Know this to be the mind of the glorious Guru. Remain in that. Within the space of pure perception, innate awareness is free from emanating and gathering. And the unceasing energy of awareness arises as everything. Pervading all of samsara and nirvana. This is the glory of existence and peace. Awareness, emptiness in the expanse, free of grasping. Ah. So I'm going to ask a question. Innate awareness. So within the space of pure perception, innate awareness is free from emanating and gathering. Free of a lot of activity. And the unceasing energy of awareness arises as everything. Everything we experience. Have you experienced that? The unceasing energy of awareness, or the unceasing energy of our mind, arises as everything. This is what my teacher was pointing out when they were saying, your dream is you, I'm you, sound is you. Everything we experience is through us. So how to do that in a way that's uncontrived, open, free. Not a lot of, this one particular line, so good at reading and forgetting that I never remember anything anymore. Free of emanating and gathering. Right? Emanating and gathering refers to, conscious creation, mental, either conceptual conscious creation or unconscious, right? But this mental activity. So free from mental activity, can we experience everything as coming, being experienced just by us, by our mind. Temperature, sound, emotion, visual consciousness. And when we're in this state, where is self and where is other? Something to think about. And in one way, all we're doing is interacting with our own creations. And this is what my root teacher was talking about when she said that, you know, all sentient beings are our mothers because they all create us. You know, even just looking at these, you know, faces, you know, right here on Zoom, where we create one another. If you just look up at whatever is directly in front of you, taking a moment to appreciate the intimacy of just interacting with that visual consciousness and hearing sound, feeling the temperature in the room, feeling the clothes on your body, and your body seated upon whatever you're seated on. And any sounds from outside of the room. This is our direct experience. That's such an incredible thing. And the awareness that allows us to be able to connect with all of this is our guru. And when we begin to practice like this, our practice isn't to like on the cushion, off the cushion kind of thing. It's constant. Whether we, you know, show up for that or not is a different thing, right? But like, it's funny because we'll tell ourselves, and I've done this, you know, in the busyness of my life with as a parent, oh, I don't have time to practice as much as I want. Oh, well, what about that frustration you're feeling right now? You know, and all of that, this limitation of time, that concept, practice with that. All we're doing is being afforded constant opportunity to practice. If we could just be uncontrived. I am also the kind of person that gets tarragon if I don't have it, unfortunately. I talk a good game, but I love to cook and I love food, and I kind of like to keep the integrity of the recipe going, but I will aspire to be a much more, or in fact, from now on, I aspire to be a much more shoot from the hip kind of cook. And then, so George, your question, arrive, then remain and sustain. What do you think?
I'm afraid I'm not going to arrive until next week, so I don't have a cogent answer.
Yeah. So there's one word that I think is super helpful. It's helpful for me, is this idea of like allowing our practice to become a repeated familiarization. So it's just like coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back. And, you know, we can easily accidentally make the mistake of saying, oh, you know, like I need to do this the same amount, you know, the same, in the same volume as all of the conditioning I experience in order to break that cycle, right? But that's not true. You know, was it and Shantideva in the Bodhisattva Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life said that if you shine a light in a cave that's been dark for 1,000,000 years, that one instance of shining a light in the cave ends 1,000,000 years of darkness. Right? And thinking about practice this way is really helpful. That it's the momentary experience that's much more important than the constant, sustained thing. Not to say that, oh, you should not have a constant, sustained practice, but the more we can have these glimpses, the more it breaks up what seems like an ironclad experience of samsara that we've become habituated to. So if we say, oh, I broke it up 5 times today, and that means you sat in open, direct experience 5 times for 5 minutes each time, that's great. That's so if we can get out of this kind of mechanistic, materialist, capitalist way of thinking that I need to invest just as much of an investment into my awakening that I have into my suffering. I mean, that's not even possible, right? Oh, Payne just showed up. It was Payne who asked me to talk about this text, and now they show up at the end. So, anyway, it's 3:00, 3:01 here on the East Coast, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. But Payne, this is recorded, so yeah, thank you all for being here, and yeah, shortly after this, I'm gonna jump into a retreat, and I'll be in it until the 13th. So we won't have class next week. But yeah, I wish you well. Hope your practice is deep. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll be thinking of you from retreat.